It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon, the kind that made people want to slow down and catch their breath after a long, grinding week. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue, the kind that reminded Marcus Wilson of home, of warm summers in South Carolina, and lazy afternoons spent under the sun. The kind of sky that asked nothing of you except to look up and exhale. Marcus had no plans for anything dramatic, just a quick grocery run to pick up a few essentials. Milk, eggs, bread, maybe a snack or two, nothing more. He didn't expect the day to test his patience or challenge his dignity. In fact, he felt a sense of ease as he drove into the grocery store lot. One of those moments where everything seems, if only briefly, in balance. The parking lot buzzed with weekend energy. Families shuffled in and out of sliding doors, carts rattling across asphalt. The smell of fast food from a nearby drive-thru lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the hum of idling engines. Marcus turned the radio down and looked for a space. He was dressed casually. Dark jeans, clean sneakers, a soft navy shirt. Nothing flashy, the kind of outfit that said, "I'm just here to get things done." His list was short, typed into his phone's notes app, the kind of everyday moment that rarely stuck in memory. But this one would. He turned down a row and spotted it. A single empty parking space close to the store's entrance. It was a small stroke of luck, like finding $1 in your coat pocket. He checked his mirrors, turned his blinker on just in case, and pulled in with ease. It was one of those quiet victories no one else notices, but that makes your day just a bit smoother. He put the car in park, took a sip from the reusable water bottle he kept in his cup holder, and glanced at his phone. Bread, eggs, milk, snacks, maybe some fruit. He wasn't in a rush, but he wasn't planning to linger either. He reached for the door handle. Then came the sound, the jarring screech of tires. It was sudden and sharp, slicing through the background noise of a weekend afternoon. Marcus's eyes lifted toward the noise just in time to see a large white SUV swing violently into the row, braking hard and stopping right next to him. The vehicle loomed, its engine still running, its driver barely visible through the glare of the windshield. Marcus squinted. A woman was inside. White, maybe in her late 40s or early 50s, blonde hair styled with precision, sunglasses pushed up onto her head. Her face was already twisted with rage before she even said a word. The window came down halfway, and her voice shot out like a bullet. "That was my spot," Marcus blinked. "Excuse me." "I was waiting for that spot," she shouted, jabbing a finger through the window. "You didn't see me?" "I had my blinker on." He paused, calmly checking his mental footage of the last 30 seconds. There had been no blinker, no car hovering, just an empty space, one he'd filled. "Ma'am, the space looked empty. I didn't see anyone waiting." The door to her SUV slammed shut. She stormed toward him, her heels clacking against the pavement like punctuation marks to her anger. Her body language was aggressive, shoulders squared, arms swinging stiffly at her sides. "I had been circling for 5 minutes. I was just about to pull in when you cut me off." "Typical." Marcus raised an eyebrow at that last word. "Typical?" "Yeah, typical," she snapped. "You people never care about anyone but yourselves." The words hit Marcus like a slap. Not just the insult, but the way she had grouped him effortlessly, intentionally. A familiar heat began to rise in his chest. "I'm not sure what you mean by you people," Marcus said, voice calm but clipped. She smirked, tilting her head like someone who believed she held all the power in the conversation. "Don't act like you don't know. You just think the rules don't apply to you." Marcus looked around. A couple was loading groceries into their car a few spaces down, stealing glances at the scene. A teenager paused near a cart return, phone in hand, pretending not to listen. He could feel the situation changing, becoming public, but he hadn't done anything wrong. He could have offered the space, he could have apologized even if he hadn't seen her. But it was the entitlement in her tone, the venom in those 2 words, "You people," that rooted him in place. He folded his list and put it in his pocket. I didn't mean to upset you. The space was open. I parked. Karen took a step closer. Her eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped a level. But the venom was still there. Yeah, you parked. You parked where you don't belong. The weight of that sentence fell heavily between them. It was no longer about a car or a spot or even courtesy. It was about place, power, presence. Marcus didn't flinch. He had stood in spaces like this before, boardrooms, classrooms, elevators, where he wasn't supposed to speak too loudly or take up too much room, and he had learned, painfully, when to walk away. But something about today felt different. He inhaled deeply, trying to shake the tension. It's a parking space, ma'am. That's all. She scoffed, loud enough for the surrounding shoppers to hear. You always say that until someone gets hurt. There was something chilling in the way she said it, like a threat dressed in concern. Marcus didn't move. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Then came the final push, literal and figurative. She stepped forward and shoved him with both hands. It wasn't enough to knock him down, but enough to make his foot slide slightly on the pavement, enough for his balance to shift, enough to trigger a crowd reaction. A gasp, a click of a phone camera, a shopping cart clattering to a halt. Marcus's hand gripped the edge of his car. Karen stepped back, chest heaving, her face twisted in a fury that felt bigger than the moment, like she'd been storing it for years. And Marcus stood still, not because he was weak, not because he was afraid, but because he knew that in this moment, in this country, a black man reacting the way any other person might, raising his voice, asserting himself, could change everything. He exhaled, slow and steady. This was supposed to be a simple errand, but there was nothing simple about being a black man in a white woman's narrative. The blue sky above hadn't changed. The grocery store still stood behind him. But Marcus Wilson's day had taken a turn shaped not by choice, but by confrontation. And it all began with a parking spot. The moment the words left her mouth, "You people," something ancient stirred inside Marcus. He had heard those words before, in classrooms and boardrooms, at gas stations and grocery stores. Sometimes they were wrapped in fake politeness, sometimes veiled with coded language, but Karen said it plainly, proudly, with the venom of someone who had long believed the world belonged to her, and people like him were just trespassers. Marcus felt it, not just in his chest, but in his memory. It was like time slowed, and in those two words, he could hear echoes of other voices from other moments. You don't belong here. Go back where you came from. You're lucky to even be here. He looked at Karen and saw more than just a woman throwing a tantrum over a parking space. He saw a system. He saw generations of unchecked entitlement wrapped in the armor of white suburban normalcy. She wasn't just mad. She believed she was right. She believed she had a right to the space, to control the narrative, and to humiliate him without consequences. And why wouldn't she? Marcus had lived long enough to know that people like her were often believed first, protected faster, and forgiven more easily. He had seen it in courtrooms, in HR offices, on the evening news. He had friends who had lost jobs, reputations, even lives because someone like Karen had decided to twist a moment of discomfort into a weapon of destruction. This was no longer about a car. It was about history, and Marcus could feel every inch of it pressing down on him. Karen had crossed a line, and she hadn't done it timidly. She had done it with confidence, with that deadly brand of certainty that made people think they could say whatever they wanted and never be held accountable. You parked where you don't belong. Those words weren't just charged. They were meant to reduce him, to label him as other, as invader, as criminal. Marcus stared back at her. His silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. It was experience. He knew the moment he raised his voice, he'd become a threat. The second his expression changed, he'd be perceived as aggressive. If he defended himself, he'd be dangerous. If he tried to walk away, it would be seen as guilt. There was no winning, not in her version of the story. and people around them were already beginning to choose sides. Not aloud, not obviously, but in posture, in subtle glances, in the way no one said a word. Their silence said plenty. Karen sensed it too. She doubled down. "What's the matter? Cat butt your tongue. Thought you people liked to run your mouths." Marcus's stomach twisted. There was something so casual in the way she said it, like she was ordering a coffee, like racial hostility was just part of her regular vocabulary. It was practiced. It was inherited. He had promised himself long ago that he would never let someone like her drag him down into their ugliness. But there was a part of him that was tired. Tired of swallowing the rage, of taking the high road while others danced gleefully in the gutter. He stepped back to create space. She stepped forward to fill it. It was a dance as old as America. And then she touched him. That shove, though small, was everything. It was the moment she escalated from verbal hostility to physical provocation, the moment she crossed from angry customer to aggressor. But Marcus already knew, if police arrived, the narrative would change. Her shove would vanish, her venomous words would be forgotten. She'd become the frightened woman, and he the imposing black man. He glanced around. More people were watching now. Phones were appearing in hands, some already recording. It was both a curse and a shield. Invisibility had vanished, but so had impunity. Marcus straightened. He didn't touch her, didn't respond, but his face had changed. The calm had cracked not into fury, but into focus. The weight of what she had done, what she had said, sat in his chest like a stone. And Karen, she smirked, because she knew. She knew the power she held. She knew what her scream could trigger. She knew what her tears could erase. "Go ahead," she said. "Hit me. I dare you." Her voice wasn't scared. It was taunting. She wanted him to. She needed him to. Because once he did, she could become the victim. Marcus's fists tightened, nails pressing against his palm, but he didn't lift a finger. He turned to walk away, and behind him, her voice followed, high and loud. "That's right. Walk away, just like the rest of you. Coward. You're all talk, just like the rest of your kind." The words were knives, sharp and aimed, but Marcus didn't stop. He wouldn't give her the ending she wanted. At least not yet. The shift had happened. The moment that turned a quiet grocery trip into something else. Something that would stain the rest of his day, maybe his week. Something he'd have to explain to someone later. Something that would live in his bones longer than it had any right to. And it had started with 2 words. So simple. So familiar. "You people." The moment Karen stepped into Marcus's personal space, it became clear that this wasn't about frustration anymore. It was about dominance. She was no longer a woman angry over a parking space. She had transformed into a self-appointed enforcer of imagined rules, drawn not from law, but from entitlement. There was something chillingly familiar in her stance. The squared shoulders, the pointed finger, the tone laced with superiority. It wasn't just anger. It was authority, the kind passed down through generations. Unquestioned, unchecked, unapologetic. Marcus had seen it in the past, in landlords who looked at his application and then suddenly remembered the unit was no longer available, in security guards who followed him through stores pretending not to, in women who clutched their purses tighter as he passed by, even when he was wearing a suit. Karen wasn't just claiming the parking spot. She was claiming the moral high ground, the story, the narrative. And in her story, she was the righteous citizen, the rule follower, the rightful owner of space. Marcus was the disruption, the outsider, the violator of an invisible code. And she knew the power of perception. She knew that a woman like her, white, composed, middle class, would be believed first. That if someone called the police, her version of the story would be the starting point. That Marcus's silence, his skin, and his presence would all be used as evidence against him. "This is exactly why people like you shouldn't be here," she hissed. "You take and take and take. No respect, no manners, just barging in like you own everything." Marcus didn't respond, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had everything to lose. He could feel the judgment in the stares of passers-by, the way some subtly slowed their pace, hoping to overhear. Others looked away, pretending they hadn't seen. It was a public performance now, and Karen knew she had the stage. She took another step forward. "You think you're safe just because there are people around. Because we're in public," she said, her voice tightening with barely restrained fury. "People like you always push it too far. Then you cry victim." Marcus's jaw tightened. The irony burned, but Karen wasn't done, not even close. Her eyes flicked to the phones she noticed recording, and she raised her voice just enough to be heard clearly by anyone watching. It wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was strategic, purposeful. "This thug assaulted me. He threatened me. I was just trying to park, and he jumped out screaming at me." Marcus blinked. The gaslighting was instantaneous. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words felt heavy. Anything he said could be twisted. Any move he made could be exaggerated. He had seen it happen. Black men who had lost their jobs, reputations, and sometimes their lives over moments just like this because someone decided to perform outrage. Karen's tone shifted again, this time pleading, dramatic. "I'm a single woman, alone. I was scared. He wouldn't let me pass. He looked so angry, so aggressive. I didn't know what to do." Marcus stood frozen. The manipulation was stunning. She knew exactly what she was doing. Painting a picture, sowing doubt, shifting the spotlight. The narrative she was building wasn't built on truth, but on centuries of stereotypes. She wasn't reacting to what had happened. She was rewriting it. In Karen's version, she was the victim of intimidation. Marcus was the aggressor. Her words were designed to trigger the worst assumptions about black men. Dangerous, volatile, threatening. And she knew those assumptions didn't need much encouragement to grow. Marcus inhaled deeply, trying to ground himself. He looked down at his hands, still by his sides. He had not moved, not touched her, not raised his voice, and yet her words had already begun to reshape the reality around them. He looked around. Some bystanders had stepped back. Others whispered to one another. The uncertainty was spreading. The phones were still up, still recording, and in this era, that was his only shield. Objective proof that he had done nothing wrong. But even that felt fragile. Karen's voice dropped again, quiet enough to evade the phones, but loud enough for him to hear. "They'll believe me, you know. I look like their sister, their daughter. You look like a headline." Marcus's skin crawled. She had no shame, no hesitation. She had moved from passive aggression to open psychological warfare, and she was enjoying it. He had never felt so exposed, so violated, not by the shove, not even by the words, but by the knowledge that she had done this before. Maybe not in a parking lot, maybe not with a slap, but this manipulation, this weaponization of identity, it was too precise to be spontaneous. Karen had been taught by a culture that protected her, empowered her, emboldened her. She had been conditioned to believe that her tears were armor, her anger was justified, and her version of reality would always prevail. And Marcus, like so many before him, was left to navigate it, survive it, absorb it. He could walk away. He should walk away. But something inside him cracked. Not rage, not hatred, something deeper, something cold, a sense of finality. He wasn't going to be her villain, but he wasn't going to be her victim either. He took a slow step back and said, loud enough for the cameras, "Ma'am, I said nothing but the truth. You approached me, you shouted at me, you pushed me, and now you're lying. I'm not going to argue with you." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Sue me now? Is that it? Try to get your 15 minutes of fame." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. He was done playing a role in a script. This wasn't just about a woman angry over a parking spot. It was about the structures that enabled her, the silence that protected her, The system that gave her power simply because of who she was and punished people like Marcus for daring to exist in the same space. He turned away, walking slowly toward the store, heart pounding, hands still steady. Behind him, Karen shouted after him, words laced with mockery and contempt, but he didn't turn back. He couldn't afford to, not anymore. Marcus's steps were slow and deliberate as he walked away, each one a silent declaration that he refused to be baited into the stereotype she wanted him to embody. But with every inch of distance he gained, the pressure in his chest only grew heavier. He could feel her eyes boring into his back, her energy still clinging to the air like smoke. He didn't make it far. There was a sudden impact, a shove, sharp and full of fury. Karen had charged forward and pushed him hard between the shoulders. He stumbled, catching himself against the warm hood of a parked car. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Foams were raised higher now. Someone let out a shocked, "Oh my God." The scrape of his shoe against the asphalt was loud in his ears. Marcus turned slowly, his pulse thudding in his neck. He looked at her, standing just feet away, chest heaving, eyes wild, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he said, his voice calm but tight, every syllable vibrating with control. Karen sneered. "You think you can just walk away from me? I'm not done with you." Her hands were clenched at her sides, her body trembled not with fear, but with fury. The mask of false victimhood had dropped, revealing something unfiltered and venomous beneath. Marcus took a deep breath. "You put your hands on me." "I'll do it again if you keep acting like a punk," she snapped. That was the moment something changed. The crowd wasn't just watching. They were recording, murmuring, reacting. It wasn't just her anymore. It wasn't just Marcus. It was public. It was real. And it was escalating. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to walk away, to get inside the store, to disappear. But something rooted him to the spot. Dignity, maybe, or the simple refusal to let someone like Karen walk all over him. He stared at her, quiet, but his silence was a roar. "Go ahead, hit me," she said suddenly. "That's what you people do, right?" The venom in her voice turned the words into weapons. The phrase sank into his skin like ice. "You people again." His jaw clenched, his fists curled, but he didn't move. Not until the hand did. The slap came out of nowhere, fast, loud, sharp. Her palm connected with his face in a burst of contact that left his cheek stinging, and his head briefly turned to the side. The sound echoed, slapping skin against the humid silence of the parking lot. And that was it. He looked at her, really looked at her. She expected him to lose control. She wanted him to strike back in rage, to become the monster she could then point at with righteous fury. But Marcus wasn't reacting from rage. His mind was a hurricane of clarity. She had struck him in public, in front of cameras, in front of witnesses, and somehow she still believed she would walk away as the victim. His hand moved, not as a fist, but open-palmed. His fingers met her cheek in a slap that was controlled, deliberate, and firm. Not brutal, not retaliatory, but enough. Karen stumbled back, clutching her face in shock. "You hit me," she screamed, her voice cracking, shrill with disbelief. "You're going to jail for this." The irony struck Marcus like a second slap. "You hit me first." He wanted to scream, but he didn't. She turned to the crowd. "He assaulted me. Did you see that? This thug just hit me." Marcus stepped back, his breath tight in his chest. He looked around, saw the people filming, the ones whispering. Some stared at him with disbelief. Others shook their heads. He couldn't read their minds, but he knew what years of headlines and injustice had taught him. Being right doesn't always mean being safe. "I didn't want trouble," he said aloud. "Not for her, but for the people holding phones. She hit me first." Karen hissed at him through clenched teeth. "You're done. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of animal you are." Her words were acid, but Marcus had already made his decision. He turned his back and walked toward the store, the sting on his cheek throbbing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Behind him, Karen howled. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. The slap echoed through the parking lot like a gunshot. It cut through the murmur of the onlookers, the hum of distant engines, the muted sound of shopping carts rattling against the pavement. Everything froze for one long, trembling moment. Marcus stood completely still, his palms slowly lowering after the contact. He hadn't hit her in anger. He hadn't lashed out. He had reacted calmly, firmly, with restraint. But none of that would matter. Not to her, not to the world. She knew how to manipulate. Karen staggered back, her hand pressed dramatically to her cheek, her face an exaggerated mask of shock and wounded fragility. "You get me," she repeated, louder now, shrill enough to pierce through the rising wave of whispers. A crowd had fully formed. Strangers had stopped mid-step, some holding grocery bags, others phones. Several were already recording. Some just stared stunned. And in the middle of it all, Karen spun to face them, her voice cracked with theatrical horror. "He'd assaulted me. Did you see that? He slapped me." She pointed at Marcus as if identifying a criminal in a lineup. "He's dangerous. He just hit a woman in broad daylight. Call the police." Marcus's mouth opened, but only for a breath. He knew this game. He knew how fast public opinion could shift, how quickly self-defense could be recast as aggression, when the skin tones didn't match the roles society had already assigned. His heart pounded, not from guilt, but from fear. Fear that the truth would be ignored, that the crowd wouldn't care who hit first, that the slap, however restrained, would be enough to rewrite the entire encounter. One woman in the crowd turned to another and asked softly, "Did you see what happened?" "I saw her hit him first," the second woman whispered back, but neither spoke loud enough for it to matter. Karen fell to her knees, still clutching her cheek, her voice now trembling with practiced vulnerability. "He could have killed me. He snapped. I was just trying to talk to him, and he went crazy." The words were daggers, sharpened with intention, and Marcus knew they were meant to cut deep, not just into his present, but into his future. He turned slowly to face the crowd, raising his voice not in anger but in clarity. "She hit me first. There are cameras. She shoved me. She slapped me. I defended myself. That's all." But he wasn't sure if it would be enough. Truth, after all, had always been a negotiable currency in situations like this. A teenage boy with his phone out stepped forward. "I got it all, man. Don't worry. I recorded everything." Marcus looked at him, young, uncertain, but brave enough to step out of the shadows. He gave a faint nod of gratitude. From behind him, Karen screeched, "You people think you can get away with anything. I'll ruin you. You'll lose your job, your life, everything." There it was again, "you people." Her go-to weapon, a phrase loaded with venom, reinforced by centuries of hate and hierarchy. Marcus's voice was calm when he turned back to her. "You hit me first. You shoved me. You insulted me. And when you couldn't get your way, you tried to destroy me. That's what this is." She didn't answer. Instead, she stumbled toward her car, fumbling for her phone. "I'm calling the police. Let's see how you like explaining this." Marcus stood tall, his hands in plain sight, his expression unreadable. "Call them." And she did. The moment she raised the phone to her ear, her tone changed again. Gone was the rage, replaced by trembling fear. "Yes, 911. I need help. I've been attacked. I'm at the Westfield grocery parking lot. A man, he's black, about 6 feet. He hit me. I'm scared. Please send someone." Marcus turned away, trying to keep his breathing steady. It was happening. The script was unfolding exactly as it always had, and there was nothing he could do to stop it, only survive it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A message from his friend Terrell, just a meme. He stared at it blankly for a moment before sliding the phone back. It was surreal how the world kept turning even as yours tilted sideways. The sirens came 10 minutes later. 2 cruisers pulled into the lot, lights flashing, tires crunching over the asphalt. Officers stepped out, hands near their holsters, eyes scanning. Karen ran toward them. There he is. That's him. Marcus raised his hands instinctively. The lead officer approached slowly, cautiously. Sir, what happened here? Marcus kept his voice steady. She shoved me, then slapped me. I reacted. There are witnesses. People recorded it. Karen screamed behind him. He's lying. I'm the victim. Look at my face. Look at it. The officer glanced between them, then turned to the crowd. Anyone have video? A couple of hands rose. The teenage boy stepped forward. I do. I got the whole thing. The officer took his phone and began to watch. Marcus waited. His fate, at that moment, rested not on justice but on pixels, on frames per second, on the willingness of a young man to stand up when it mattered. The officer finished the video. His face didn't change, but his posture did. He turned back to Karen. Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you some questions. Karen blinked. What? No, he hit me. You saw my face. We saw the video, the officer replied. And just like that, the tide began to turn. The crowd had mostly dispersed by the time the last officer closed their notebook. A few lingered at a distance, pretending to be busy with their carts or phones. But Marcus could feel their curiosity, their eyes flicking toward him like they were waiting for the next scene. He stood beside the patrol car, his back resting lightly against the metal door. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by something heavier. An ache had started in his chest and spread outward. The officer who had reviewed the video had assured him they would write an accurate report and that they had all the footage and statements they needed. But Marcus knew better than to equate process with peace. Karen was sitting in the back of the second patrol car now. Her face was turned away, but he could still feel her presence like a stain on the air. Her performance had ended, at least for now, but Marcus knew it wasn't truly over. This wouldn't vanish the moment the sirens did. This was the kind of encounter that clung to the skin. He rubbed the back of his neck, the spot where her shove had thrown him off balance. The slap on his cheek had faded into a dull throb. The physical pain was almost nothing. It was the emotional aftermath that refused to go quietly. Officer Martinez, the younger of the 2 responding cops, stepped toward him. You did everything right, she said, her voice steady but kind. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you kept your cool. You stayed calm. That matters. Marcus nodded, grateful for her tone, but not comforted. It shouldn't have to be this hard just to defend yourself. Martinez hesitated. No, it shouldn't. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they both understood, but wouldn't say aloud. When the police finally pulled away, taking Karen with them for further questioning, the lot fell quiet. Marcus stood in the same spot for a while, watching the last flickers of flashing lights disappear around the corner. The quiet didn't bring relief. It brought clarity. He walked slowly toward his car. The sun had shifted in the sky, casting long shadows. The whole incident had taken less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime had passed. When he slid into the driver's seat, the silence inside the car was deafening. No one yelling, no one accusing, just the echo of everything that had happened crashing into him all at once. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled, not from anger, from exhaustion. He thought of every time in his life he had been told to stay calm, to not escalate, to walk away, to take the high road. Today, he had done all those things, and yet here he was, drained, rattled, and uncertain of what the world would see once the footage hit the internet or the police report hit a desk. He imagined the possible headlines. Black man strikes woman in grocery store lot. Witness videos show altercation in suburban parking lot. Woman claims fear for her life before being taken in for questioning. Even the truth had to compete with perception. Marcus finally let go of the wheel and leaned back, closing his eyes, but instead of peace, he saw her face again. Karen, twisted with anger, then contorted into victimhood. The way she screamed. The way her voice shifted to trembling fear when the dispatcher picked up. He felt like screaming, not in rage, but in sheer frustration, because he had done everything right, and still it could have gone so wrong. He let out a long, shaky breath. Then he opened his eyes and started the car. On the way home, the city passed by in a blur. Red lights, green lights, buildings, people walking their dogs, sipping coffee, going about their days like nothing had changed. But something had changed for Marcus. He'd always known this world wasn't fair, but today it didn't just remind him. It exhausted him with the weight of proof. And the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of a soul worn thin. Marcus parked in front of his apartment complex and turned off the engine, but he didn't get out immediately. He sat in silence, hands resting on his lap, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant hum of the city. The last thing he wanted to do was replay what had happened, but it looped in his mind like an unstoppable reel. Her voice, a slap, the cameras, the flashing lights. He eventually forced himself out of the car, carrying nothing but the emotional weight of the day. His groceries were still at the store, abandoned somewhere between trauma and self-preservation. That night, Marcus barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Karen's voice echoing, "You're done." He wasn't afraid of her, at least not physically, but he feared what she could represent. He knew how people like her operated, especially when they felt humiliated. And Marcus had humiliated her. By staying calm, by slapping back, by not falling into her trap, by walking away with his dignity. Morning came with little fanfare, a grey sky, a slight drizzle. He drank coffee in silence, then showered and prepared himself to return to the grocery store, this time to pick up what he originally came for. As he pulled into the parking lot again, something inside him tightened. He scanned the area, not out of fear but out of instinct. It looked normal, just another day. The confrontation of yesterday had been wiped away by time and routine. But as he walked back toward his car after shopping, a sinking feeling crept into his gut. From a distance, Marcus could see something was wrong. His car was scratched, not just a key line here or there, but long, jagged gouges that stretched from the passenger door all the way to the back panel. Deep, angry strokes. Malicious. He froze for a moment, heart thudding. Then he walked closer, his shopping bags hanging loosely at his side. The damage wasn't subtle. Whoever did this had taken their time. It wasn't random. It was personal. Karen. It had to be her. Marcus didn't need proof to know it. He felt it in his bones. He imagined her face, smirking, satisfied, crouched beside his car with her keys clenched like a blade. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message. I can still get to you. He dropped the bags into the trunk and stood there for a while, staring at the scratches. Should he call the police? File a report? Would they believe him without proof? Would it even matter? He looked around. No cameras, no witnesses, just silence and streaks of silver where paint used to be. Marcus leaned against the hood, exhausted. This was the kind of quiet retaliation that so often went unnoticed. Not loud, not bloody, just damaging in ways that stuck around. He felt like yelling, but instead, he sat in his car and closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, the anger had cooled into something harder, determination. Karen thought this would break him, that he would be too scared, too exhausted, too disheartened to respond, but she was wrong. If she thought this story was over, she had no idea what kind of man she had picked a fight with. Marcus didn't hesitate this time. The moment he returned home and closed the apartment door behind him, he locked it, walked straight to the kitchen counter, and grabbed his phone. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't panicked. He was focused. It rang twice before the dispatcher answered. 911. What's your emergency? Marcus took a breath. Yes, I'd like to report a crime. My car was vandalized. I believe it was done in retaliation to an incident yesterday at the Westfield grocery parking lot. The person I suspect is already on record with the police from that event. The voice on the other end was neutral, professional. She took his name, details, the location of the damage, and assured him that an officer would be sent to take a report. Marcus thanked her, then hung up and leaned against the counter. He didn't expect miracles. He knew how these things often went. No video, no witnesses, no confession. But this wasn't about that anymore. This was about drawing a line, about not letting her think she had the last word. The officer arrived an hour later. Officer Reynolds, different precinct, but familiar tone. Calm, observant, professional. He took pictures of the damage, asked Marcus to describe the previous day's altercation, and nodded slowly as Marcus recounted the whole story. Reynolds scratched his chin. You're saying this woman, Karen Hayes, was involved in a physical altercation with you yesterday, and you believe she returned today to damage your vehicle? Yes, Marcus said. I can't prove it, but it's not a coincidence. She told me I was done. This feels like the next step. The officer jotted notes. You're not the first person to deal with someone retaliating after being confronted. These kinds of attacks, property damage, they're meant to intimidate. But I'll be honest with you, without footage or witness, pressing charges is difficult. Marcus nodded. I figured. But we'll document everything. Reynolds continued. And if she shows up again or escalates, if anything else happens, you call us immediately. Don't wait. Marcus looked at the deep gouges in the paint. They weren't going anywhere, like scars. Do you think she'll come back? He asked. The officer considered it. She might. People like that, they hate feeling powerless. You stood up to her. That bruises egos like hers more than anything else. Marcus's jaw clenched. He didn't want to be part of anyone's power struggle. He just wanted to be left alone. Reynolds finished the report and handed Marcus a copy. We'll keep it on file. I'll add a note referencing yesterday's incident. If she retaliates again, this will show a pattern. After the officer left, Marcus stood in the driveway for a while, staring at his car. A part of him wanted to call it a day, to collapse into bed, and forget everything. But the other part, the part that had grown up hearing his father's voice say, never let fear make your choices for you, that part knew he had one more call to make. He called the local precinct, not 911 this time, but the direct line. He asked for a copy of the incident report from the altercation with Karen. Then he asked what the process would be for filing formal charges. He wrote down names, file numbers, case references. The world might not always care about people like him, but Marcus Wilson had decided he was done waiting for justice to find him. He was going to go get it. The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table, suit pressed, tie slightly too tight around his neck, back straight. The air buzzed with tension, not loud or chaotic, but dense. It felt like something important hung in the balance, and maybe it did. Maybe this moment was more than just about him and Karen Hayes. Maybe it was about every other time someone like her had walked away untouched. Karen sat across the room, her demeanor carefully constructed. She wore soft colors, no makeup that looked too dramatic, her expression innocent, rehearsed. But Marcus could still see the same arrogance in her posture. She wasn't remorseful. She was playing a role. Judge Martinez entered, and the room rose. Once seated again, the opening remarks began. The prosecution was direct. This case is about accountability. Ms. Hayes began a conflict, assaulted a man, and then retaliated in a calculated attempt to intimidate and destroy his property. We're here not because of a single slap, but because of a pattern, a belief that she could do all this without consequences. Karen's attorney painted a different picture. My client is a respected member of her community, he said. She was frightened. She made mistakes, yes, but the escalation was mutual. We asked the court to see her as human, not as a villain. Marcus listened, jaw tight. How easily the narrative could shift. But today he had the truth, and he had evidence. Witnesses were called: the teenager who filmed the video, the couple who had watched the slap, Officer Reynolds. Their testimonies were steady, aligning with Marcus's version of events. Then Karen took the stand. Her voice trembled. Her eyes watered on cue. "I was afraid," she said. He was angry. He looked threatening. "I didn't mean for any of it to go that far." Marcus's lawyer stood, approaching calmly. "Ms. Hayes, did you strike Mr. Wilson before he touched you?" Karen hesitated. I pushed him, but only because I was scared." "And did you slap him?" Yes, but he slapped me too." "After you assaulted him?" "It wasn't like that." The lawyer played the video. Karen looked away. Closing statements came and went. The jury was dismissed to deliberate. Marcus sat in the hallway outside, staring at the floor. Minutes passed, then an hour. Then the door creaked open. The jury had returned. They filed in, and the judge asked for the verdict. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Karen Hayes, guilty of assault and property damage." Marcus exhaled. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was relief, like finally letting go of a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for weeks. The judge issued sentencing guidelines: restitution, community service, a suspended sentence. It wasn't prison time, but it was accountability. Karen didn't look at him as she was led away. Outside, Marcus stood under the gray sky, hands in his pockets. He had won, but more importantly, he had been heard. The gray sky above the courthouse hadn't changed, but something inside Marcus had. He walked slowly down the steps, briefcase in hand, shoulders a little straighter but not lighter. He had won, yes. He had been heard. But as he reached the street and watched traffic drift past, he realized that what he felt wasn't victory. It was survival. The courtroom had given him justice, but not peace. That would take longer, because Karen Hayes wasn't just one person. She was a symbol, a face on the kind of entitlement that so many people wore like perfume, invisible to them, but suffocating to those around them. Marcus knew that the next Karen could be anywhere, at work, on a train, behind a counter. The way she looked at him, spoke to him, acted like he didn't belong, that wasn't rare. It was the world he lived in. The judgment had been read, the truth acknowledged, but Karen's sentence, restitution, community service, would end. The sting of her words, the weight of her actions, would not. Marcus found himself sitting on a park bench nearby, watching a little girl feed pigeons with her father. Her laughter broke the stillness, and for a moment, he wondered what it would be like to live in a world where you didn't have to guard yourself just to exist. He thought about his parents, about how they raised him to walk tall, to speak carefully, to never let anyone rob him of his dignity. He had done that today. He had stood firm. And yet, he still felt tired because justice didn't heal everything. It didn't erase the humiliation. It didn't quiet the echo of Karen's voice calling him a thug. It didn't undo the scratch marks on his car, or the way strangers had stared at him like he was dangerous. And so he sat, not defeated but not whole either, just breathing, just being, just trying. A woman walked by and gave him a small, warm smile. No fear, no suspicion, just acknowledgement, and in that tiny gesture, something inside him softened. Maybe that was how healing began, not in verdicts, but in moments, in being seen without fear, in being human without question. Marcus stood up, straightened his coat, and walked away from the courthouse, not triumphant, but resolute. The fight wasn't over, not for him, not for anyone who looked like him, but today he had held the line. And that was enough.